Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers, James and Justin, back again with another reaction video. And today we're going to take another look at the Redeemed Zoomer and his video titled All Arguments of God Explained in 10 Minutes.
All arguments of, like, that God exists?
Yeah, that's what I think is going on here. But
all right.
Anyway, we'll get into this and unpack it.
Unless you're raised in a Baptist Sunday school, you probably think that if you believe in God, you should be able to explain why. Luckily, Christians and other philosophers have been answering this question for over 2,000 years. Evidentialism tries to argue for God by giving evidence of supernatural events. For example, a lot of Christians think the resurrection of Christ can be historically proven because there were a lot of eyewitnesses who all died for their faith, and generally people don't die for something they know isn't true. Sometimes people give evidence of supernatural things like demonic possessions, where people start speaking in languages they don't know, or near-death experiences where people see things outside their body that they shouldn't have been able to see. The moral argument is basically, objective morality is only real if God is real, but objective morality is real, so therefore God is real. Question, is cannibalism good or bad? I think it's good. I think it's bad. I think it's good. I think it's bad. Which one of them is correct? Now, I'm assuming you agree with this one. If you don't, please stay away from me. But how do you know that he's actually correct? How do you know that
Stop it right there. Kind of like a demonization argument there. Ah, don't talk to me if you are. But come on, man. Life is very nuanced and things, you know, horrible things can happen in an apocalyptic world where, you know, everyone's fighting through the mire to, like, survive, you know, thousands of years ago. Some people suggest that, like, cannibalism might have been the thing that, like, made humanity, like, make it. What about the airplane crash in the Himalayas, like soccer teams and stuff like that?
I was just gonna say the movie Alive back in the day. They remade it, and there's I think it's Spanish version of it, and I watched it a while back, and I rewatched it, and you see the dilemma of people trying to survive, and one guy refuses to eat humans, and he dies. Yeah, and they're like begging him to eat. And he's like, I won't do it. And he even doesn't judge them for doing it, but he won't do it. And he was a Christian guy, I think, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Or Catholic or whatever. And he dies in the movie. I don't know if that's true to the story, but that happened. It's probably true to the story. I think they cared about that. But the point, for God's sake, is that, yeah, of course, there's an argument. You know, everything is super subjective. But I don't even got it in me to go over that. If you think it's bad, fine.
These aren't just different opinions. Our little friend here can only be objectively correct if there's a supreme authority that says cannibalism is bad. And that supreme authority is what we would call God. The cosmological argument is basically that something must have caused everything else. Everything that happens has a cause, and that has a cause, and that has a cause. So where does this go? Does this go on forever? That's not possible. At some point, there needs to be a first cause of everything else. There needs to be an unmoved mover, an uncaused causer, an unchanged changer. It needs to be eternal, because if it ever starts or stops existing, that's change, and it can't do that. It needs to be outside the universe, because everything in the universe is caused. It also needs to be all-powerful, because if it can't be moved, but it can move anything else, that means it's all-powerful. And this is what we would call God. I don't get it. Okay, let's make it even harder then. Everything is a mixture of act, meaning what it is, and potency, meaning what it could be. For example, a baby actually is alive, and it could be an adult. An apple actually is red, and it has the potency to be eaten. So if you eat an apple, you're actualizing its potency to be eaten. But you also are a mixture of act and potency. For example, you have the potency to be strong, but you're not. Anytime something changes you, it's actualizing a potency in you. Anytime a change happens, you have one thing actualizing another, but you can't go back forever, so eventually you need to go back to an unactualized actualizer, which we call God. God is the being that's pure act, meaning he is everything that he possibly could be. This means he must be eternal, because if he's not eternal, that means he has the potential to not exist, but there is no potential in God, so that means God must always exist. Also, if God is everything he could be, he's also all-powerful, because he cannot change, and that means nothing else could possibly do anything.
It's always interesting me, the logic of the impossible. The graphs and charts and the, you know.
Yeah.
People, we like to do it. We like to think things through, even if there's no
I hear where he's
chance.
going with it. On some level,
Yeah.
I agree. I just choose not to go beyond the actual reality that I'm experiencing. Because to me, I feel you have to go an extra step to add now this outer being, you know, of the whatever type of God you're trying to frame in your mind.
Well, recently we came across somebody that's like sort of like a non-dualist type person.
Yeah.
Like non-dual meaning like everything's one.
Yeah.
You know, with some non-dual sayings. Everything's one. You are actually God. Everything's connected. It's a dream. And this guy was saying that he actually just was like, this was making me nihilistic, and it was like not helping me. So I actually kind of like dualified myself. Because I found it comforting to pray to God.
Yeah.
And man, fair enough.
So to each their own.
Just don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Anything to God. This argument's the most complicated. It's originally from Aristotle, and it's also used by Thomas Aquinas in Summa Contra Gentiles. Pascal's wager is much simpler, and it's more of a thought experiment than an argument. Let's say you're an atheist, and atheism turns out to be correct. Nothing happens after you die. Well then, you don't really gain or lose anything, it's just kind of neutral for you. But let's say you're an atheist and it turns out you're wrong and God is real, then it could be very bad for you. Now let's say you believe in God and it turns out atheism is correct, well then you still don't gain or lose anything, it's just neutral. But if you believe in God and God is real, then you could gain everything. So between these two possibilities, which one do you want to bet on? This one gives you a much better chance, so it's better for you to believe in God. The teleological argument says that stuff in the universe seems to have a purpose, so that means the universe must have had a designer. If you found a machine lying around, you would assume that somebody designed the machine. So the teleological argument tries to argue that the universe works like a machine, so somebody must have designed the universe. Things in nature, like the human cell or the ecosystem of the world, are very complex and they work like a machine. Now, Darwinian evolution can explain why that is, but there's also things Darwinian evolution can't explain, like the 4 constants of the universe. There are physical constants, like the gravitational constant and the electron charge, the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force, that are perfectly fine-tuned, such that if they were even the slightest bit different, the entire universe would immediately collapse in on itself. The ontological argument says God exists because of the way he is. Bruh. No, seriously. God is defined as that than which nothing greater can be conceived. That means God must be all-powerful, because being all-powerful is greater than having limited power. God must be all-knowing, because being all-knowing is greater than having limited knowledge. God must be all-good, because being all-good is greater than being flawed. And God must exist, because existing is greater than not existing. Wait, just because we can think of a greatest...
What's that like question that atheists always ask Christians about this one? They're like, well, if God is all powerful, can God create a stone that he can't lift? I don't know, it's making me think of that. Write in the comments what the Christian, because I used to have, when I was a part of the Protestant following, I had my question in my head about, you know,
can God make a burrito so hot even he can't eat it? I've heard that one somewhere. Maybe on The Simpsons or something.
Leave in the comments the answers to that.
No, but hang on. Before we move on from that, think about that question for a second, because I've literally seen violence occur because of that question. Because you know, one person's going, "Well, why would God do that?" The other person's like, "That's not the point," you know, and they snap. But so think about that question: can God do something he can't do? Can God do something so crazy even he can't do it? You know, a lot of things can be balanced out. You will be able to satiate your mind in a lot of different ways. You'll be able to be like, well, what's the opposite of cold? Hot. What's this? You can satiate your mind a lot, you know. But I think what people often do is they give up before taking it all the way to the end. You take that all the way to the end, you're going to find something that you cannot. That is paradoxical, and you can't.
I was just about to say, let's pepper in some paradox.
We can't talk about it here, but trust me, you can go so far that you reach paradox, and that the answer is at least not English anymore or any language on earth. It's like there's an answer there, but I've heard. I'm not claiming to know it. But I'm saying that I think that there's an answer there that is experiential in nature. You go, what the heck does that mean? What does that mean? The answer is experiential. It means exactly what I said. There's some things that English doesn't do. You can't ever be like, and scientifically, that's how plant matter manifests out of nothing and exercises, you know, things that look like will and everything like that.
Yeah.
There's no, you can't science that to the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, the most you could do, the best I've ever been able to done is go, okay, let me try to explain God here, because even if you know, something had to come first. The best I think I can do with rationality is that, behold everything, which indicates nothing, you know, which indicates everything again. They emerge spontaneously. It's like there only is everything because of the ability for there to be nothing. You can't even, there's no option of nothing without an everything.
Yeah.
So of course, from nothing spurs everything. That's just, what more can you do than that?
Yeah, it's very hard. And I
without
even you saying that, I'm like, I don't necessarily fully even understand what you're saying. I'm just hearing it and trying to process it, and you know, and sometimes it just, you know, this stuff takes time and we keep just mulling over it. So anyway, let's continue.
Possible being doesn't mean it actually exists. Well, actually it does, because existing in reality is greater than just existing in the mind. Okay, but I could use that to argue for the existence of the greatest possible pizza. Well, actually, no, you can't, because the definition of pizza implies limitations, like a limited size and able to be broken. If you had a pizza that was indestructible, eternal, all-powerful, and infinitely large, it wouldn't be a pizza anymore, it would just be God. Basically, if your pizza gets infinitely great, it'll turn into God. There is also the argument from personal experience. It may sound silly, but everyone does see the world through the lens of their own personal experience. A lot of people are convinced God exists either because of supernatural events they've seen, or because of answered prayers, or just coincidences in their life. So this is very good at convincing oneself that God exists, but not very good at convincing other people.
But I think that one should not be overlooked, is that experience one, like we just got into. Because we all do experience this reality through our own perceptions, and I can only go from my own perception. When I look at the world and everything that's around me, I personally see it as divine. I see the divinity within the reality. There's something at the bottom core, which for me, it smells like magic. And, you know, whether you need to go outside of the reality to see that, or you see it right here, right now, you know, to each their own experience.
It's kind of a frustrating answer you just gave, you know, that,
I know.
that you happen to see divinity. There's a scene in one of these Will Smith's movies that he came up with, the one where he's a slave.
Yeah.
And the one guy's like, Will Smith's like praying and he's got hope. And the guy's like, why do you pray and have hope? Like, I don't see God that way. Yeah. And Will Smith's answer is essentially in the movie like, well, I don't know why you don't see God, but I do. And so I'll pray for you.
Yeah.
That's not an answer. Your answer ought to be transferable. Otherwise, maybe you shouldn't say it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah.
That's like saying, I don't know why you were born into a poor country, but I was born into a rich one.
Going around telling other people that they have to believe in the thing that you believe in, that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Well, look at the justifications they make. Look at the example I just said. Imagine a guy going, I don't know why you were born into abusive parents, but my parents love me.
Yeah.
And then people try to rationalize that, and they'll come up with a theory like, well, maybe you're paying for something you did in a past life.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, no, that's bullshit. You know, what is that? You got amnesia and you're paying for something you don't even remember you did? That's bullshit. Yeah. And what's another one? There's a string of justifications. And in the book of Job, his friends come over and they're trying to figure out what Job must have done to deserve all this stuff that God did to him. And it's like pretty clearly depicted as they were wrong. Like they were, no, you can't reason out why what's happening to you is happening to you. And so, you know, maybe the same with good. Yeah. But it's not, but
it's weird though, because some people who go through awful traumatizing things, you've got the batch that will like, I don't see God, I don't see anything. And there's other people who go through wild trauma who do see God. How is that? How is it that two people can interpret the exact same terrible things happening? Some see God and then others don't. Right?
Isn't a fair answer...
I don't know,
I guess.
I don't know.
Yeah, which would be what you originally said.
Yeah.
But is that true for you? I mean, who's telling the truth about the situation they're in here?
Yeah.
You swear on your soul, you look around and you see everything as divine? Like, is that something you've decided to see thing as? Like, that makes sense, so I'm going to choose to see everything as divine. Yeah. Or is your experience that even everything is divine? Like, it's divine.
No, it's more...
What does that even mean? What does it mean to see everything as divine? What does that mean?
It's for me, I guess it's a process in the mind that, like, when I look at reality, I see magic at the root, which blows other people. Like, what?
But what do you mean by magic?
Why would there be something rather than nothing? There could have easily just have well been nothing, but yet there's something here. And then,
but why choose the word divine or magic?
Because I see it as infinitely unexplainable.
But then why doesn't that suffice? Why doesn't it? Why the choice of words of divine rather than I see it as infinitely inexplainable? That's like, yeah, hell yeah. No, we can all get on great because it's neutral. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean it's even good. What if it's divinely hell? Yeah. Oh, everything exists, but it's hell. Why not?
Yeah.
Why can't it be hell?
Maybe because I don't know. Yeah, I could throw away the word magic and divine and say infinitely inexplainable if I wanted to. Yeah, sure, why not? They're just, at the end of the day, they're just words that maybe might be pointing to the exact same thing.
So I think honesty is paramount. Honesty, transparency, something that a lot of people don't want to. Stop it, man. You're making me do something I don't want to do. Well, too bad. I think that we got to get as objective as humanly possible, which is why, I've shared with you, I've got a secret list I've been compiling of a comprehensive of evil.
Yeah.
That's what I started with. Let's get real clear about what evil could possibly be. And I wrote it out. Yeah. And now I'm reverse engineering it because it dawned on me, I'm not sure I know just what kind of arrogant asshole would I have to be like, oh, I know what's good and I know what's bad. Yeah. No, I've been pooling over trying to figure out list-wise what good and bad are.
Yeah.
And some of the natures of those things. What's the nature of evil? Do these things, does evil spread? Does it have a tendency to blind? And what would be the opposite of something that has a tendency to, like, grow and blind? And then so you reverse engineer it by looking at it, right? So, but it's all of this information hinges on a good faith repartee. Hinges on good faith between you and I that we're being utterly transparent.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of people that never reveal who they are. If you ask, doesn't matter if you had a gun to their head, they'd be like, I don't have ups and downs. I suggest that you probably got some kind of a disorder. Because they're not willing to admit that they're just as, struggle with all the same anxiety, emotions, same insecurities, everything like that. I think a lot of people maintain something. And then they get angry at you. Yeah, you're only like that because you're the precise amount whatever you are. And so you can't compete. And so it's all well and good for you because you can't compete. So of course you care about honesty. The rest of us don't have to do honesty because we get away with all the stuff because of blessings like that. But I do not believe you get away with it. I don't think you get away with it. Because I watch closely. That's how creepy I am. I'm watching what's going on and I see people suffering all over the place. So all of this hinges on honesty. Yeah. What is your exact experience? What are you parroting? Are people parroting things?
It's their interpretation. It's just they've been told a whole bunch of things. They put a bunch of concepts and ideas in their head, and then they interpret it through whatever they've got, whatever information has been given to them. They try to interpret it and construct it to make something make sense. Really, at the end of the day. But anyway, let's continue.
The transcendental argument basically says without God, nothing can make sense at all. There's a lot of things we assume, but we can't prove. We assume that logic works. We assume that there's consistency in the natural world. We assume that truth exists, but we can't prove any of these things scientifically, because these are the basic assumptions we need to make to even do science. All of these things make sense if we presuppose a worldview where God exists, because then we can say all these other things are grounded in the mind of God. But if God doesn't exist, then we have no justification for the things we assume, and everything just collapses. There is the argument from the mind, or consciousness, which says consciousness cannot be explained naturally. Generally, the atheist explanation of consciousness is that our brain is just a very advanced biological machine, but unlike our minds, machines can be reduced to their parts. Now, our brain can be reduced to its brain cells, but that's not the same as the experience of consciousness. For example, you could find a part of our brain that sees the color yellow, but that's not the same as the experience of seeing yellowness. You cannot study consciousness scientifically because one can only observe one's own consciousness. For example, there is no way to know if we all see the same colors. Who knows, maybe yellow looks like this to me. For all you know, you could be the only person who exists. A single atom is not conscious. Two atoms are not conscious. A bunch of atoms are not conscious. So even if you have a complex system, it's still just a complex arrangement of atoms which are not conscious. So
very deep. I like what he's good. And for Redeemed Zoomer, very good for Christian, you know, going outside of the box and looking at some of these concepts. Very good. I like it.
Like, I totally agree. Everything he said there was like, yep, true.
Where does consciousness come from? So this isn't exactly an argument for God, but it is an argument for the human soul because it shows you need something immaterial to explain consciousness. Then there's the argument from mathematics, which says there's an infinite reality higher than our physical universe. So basic math isn't all that special. For example, the number 5 corresponds to 5 apples, and 5 times 3 corresponds to 3 groups of 5 apples. But the more you get into advanced math, the more math starts to get disconnected from our world, but it still works. For example, there's real numbers, which are numbers that correspond to real things, but there's also imaginary numbers that are just as mathematically real, but they don't correspond to the real world, which is why they're not called real numbers. But they still exist mathematically, even though they don't exist in the real world. Let's look at the 5 most important numbers in mathematics. 1 is obviously important because it's the basis for all real numbers. 0 is very important because it's necessary for doing algebra. I is very important because it's the basis for all imaginary numbers. E is very important for doing exponential functions, and pi is necessary for doing math with circles. Now, all these numbers are seemingly unrelated to each other, but they fit together beautifully in this equation called Euler's identity. It was discovered by Euler, one of the greatest mathematicians in history, and he saw this as proof that math was designed by God. Also, Euler was a devout Calvinist. More evidence that math has a designer is the Mandelbrot set, which is generated by a very simple equation in the complex plane, but it produces infinite detail. You can keep zooming in on this shape and it will keep generating more and more complexity, even though nobody designed this. The Mandelbrot set is infinite, and it's not found anywhere in our universe, so that means whatever created it must also be infinite and not from our universe. So those are the common arguments for God, and by the way, this video wasn't intending to make any of these arguments. It would take a much longer video to do any of these arguments justice. It's just to give you guys an overview of these arguments so you can look more into them yourselves if you want. And now it's time for the best argument of all, which is, trust me, bro.
Well, another solid video done by the Redeemed Zoomer. We always, you know, kind of. I know you love the math ones when you get into the math there.
No, I don't.
But what is it about that the infinite nature thing? Whenever people like look at math or zoom out, that's one of the things that I don't know helps me. Like I don't know. That's what makes me think about God is somehow the infinite nature of things, looking out into the solar system and the fact that they can't find an end to anything. It just goes forever and ever. And why is my brain programmed to think in mystical ways about God that that makes me, I don't know. Why does it make me do that?
I don't know. Probably because it is mystical. It's a file not found situation. Infinity. You can't really grasp infinity. You know, the brain does weird gymnastics, and it's like, well, let me just attach that infinity spanning outward back to the beginning. There, it's a circle. I can get it now. You know.
Yeah.
People have to. They want to resolve things and have it all be neat. One thing that I'm not sure how other people regard this about me, but is I often try to. I don't want to know all the information.
Yeah.
We went to the museum yesterday and we were looking at things, and I don't want to know why this is the way it is. I want to be mystified by what I'm looking at. Sometimes artists make things with little messages put in them. Like it's like, no, there's no such thing as a blue mouse. The symbolism reason for that is this. I'm like, Why can't I just look at something I don't understand and enjoy it from that place?
Yeah.
That's the best stuff to me, is stuff I don't understand. Yeah. Don't explain to me it. Yeah. You don't think there's a chance that you could find everything out? And what happens when you learn how a magic trick is done?
Yeah.
You're like, it's not that impressive. Allow yourself to have wonder, for Pete's sake. You don't need to know everything. And if you are somebody that knows everything, good for you, because you have now taken on the burden of being the magician. Yeah. And so I hope you're a showman about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed our reaction on this one. If you did, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, share this with a friend, and everyone, until next time,
stay spiritual.